When we think about our favorite pastime, and the 8-bit era in particular, Sunsoft quickly comes to mind as one of the classic game companies. They're most remembered for a hot streak they had between 1988 and 1992, finding success with licenses, which was unusual at the time, and many gamers also know that they went downhill after that when they started outsourcing their games to non-Japanese developers, including their own American branch. But there's more to the story of Sunsoft, both before and after these two periods. Sunsoft isn't actually a company, but a brand name of Japanese electronics company Sun Electronics Corporation, or Sun Denshi, founded in Nagoya, Aichi Prefecture in 1971. Today they make all sorts of things like mobile data solutions, augmented reality technology and more. But already in 1978 they entered the gaming market after being enticed by the success of Space Invaders, like so many other companies were. They made games like Funky Fish, Arabian and Kangaroo, usually published by other companies like Atari, and they themselves went by Sun Electronics instead of the Sunsoft we know today. That was first introduced in the year of my birth, 1985, with 3 Famicom games: Super Arabian, Route 16 Turbo, and Ikki. In 1986, Sunsoft created ATLANTIS no NAZO, which had marketing that boasted how it surpassed Mario with its 100 levels. But it also had one-hit kills and a lot of cryptic stuff, so it didn't exactly surpass Mario sales-wise. If you're a Sunsoft enthusiast and go back to their earlier games, they had plenty of variety with overhead action, platforming and adventure games, but there aren't really that many worth playing today. Not that the games during this time weren't interesting. A few of their games like Ikki, 53 Stations of the Tokaido, and Mitokomon were based on Japanese history. The 4 NAZO Land games were minigame collections before that was a thing, and Dead Zone is an adventure game in the Portopia mold with story that deals with a space colony and a solar system called Sirius. Or is that SILIUS? Sunsoft made their way to America as a publisher with a Namco-developed Sky Kid in 1987. And in 88 they released Blaster Master, or Chou Wakusei Senki Metafight as it's known in Japan. This was also the start of the Sunsoft's golden age, and a great game, blending side-scrolling action with overhead action and exploration, with some great music to boot, by frequent freelance collaborator Naoki Kodaka. Sunsoft ported Sega games to the Famicom in the late 80s, I assume with Sega's permission. Sunsoft were able to acquire many licenses, which resulted in games like Fester's Quest, Platoon, and of course Batman and Gremlins 2. They skirted the edge a bit with Xenophobe and Journey to Silius, the former being quite obviously Alien, while at the same time looking like Spy vs. Spy, another licensed game, and the latter being planned as a Terminator game, before they lost the license and had to change it. Of Sunsoft's Golden Era games, I remember being aware of Batman and Blaster Master as a kid from magazines and ads, but I never played them. However, Gremlins 2 was one of the 7 games that I owned, in a rental VHS-style case, which along with a rather bland box art made it blend in nicely on my dad's movie shelf. I wonder if he ever wanted to watch the movie and picked up my game by mistake. Gremlins 2 was the best game I had besides Mario 3, with its great graphics and music. And since I never played or even knew about Ninja Gaiden at the time, it also introduced me to the concept of cutscenes. I remember beating it as a kid, but I'm fairly certain that was with the aid of my Game Genie. In my emulator-heavy days, I remember giving Batman and Blaster Master a try, and liking them both, although I gave up on the latter pretty quick as I got lost easily. Batman, on the other hand, I would just get stuck in due to the difficulty. Later on, as I started buying Famicom games, I remember reasoning with myself that I'm never going to beat the game, but at least I can enjoy the first couple of stages, with all its awesome music and dark atmospheric graphics. But in 2013, I proved myself wrong.
I'm not too close. Oh, I did it! Oh my fucking god!
To this day, I haven't fully taken on Blaster Master, because it's what I would call a guide game, where I would need to use a guide with maps in order to not waste lots of time running around, just as I did when I beat Metroid. But at least I can take solace in knowing that when I do give it my proper try, I can do so with infinite continuous. Blaster Master feels very advanced for 1988, first for mixing the side-scrolling tank sections with the overhead action segments on foot, but also for being able to go in and out of the tank. And of course the great music helps motivate one to keep playing. In fact, with the next Sunsoft game that I beat, Journey to Silius, I'm pretty sure that I would have given up on it if it wasn't for the music. This soundtrack to me is the best work that Naoki Kodaka and Sunsoft's music team has ever done. A perfect soundtrack with no bad tracks. And the game isn't bad either. Another one I thought that I would never beat, but did. Rough World, as I know it, is more difficult than Batman because of the limited continues, rather long stages, and very few health pickups. But I still appreciate its methodical approach and Mega Man-like selection of weapons. Along with the graphical style, the Lost Terminator license is still quite visible in the end product, which is a good thing. My own personal dream team of Sunsoft games is Gremlins 2, Batman and Journey to Silius. But of course there were more to come out of the golden era. I haven't fully formed an opinion of it yet, but Batman Return of the Joker certainly should get an award for graphics on NES. And similar praise should be heaped on Super Spy Hunter, known as Battle Formula in Japan and also known over there for being one of the most rare and expensive Famicom games. It's way too hard for me, but just look at it. Then they decided to get cute, so to speak, with Euphoria the Saga, a Metroid-type game with 4 playable characters. The Japanese title is Hebereke, which is slang for drunk or untrustworthy, which doesn't seem to correspond to anything in the actual game, but oh well. Also, the game had no proper sequel, but still managed a total of 9 spin-off games. 10 if you count Barcode World. Sunsoft also made a good Batman game for Mega Drive, and Nantetate Baseball is notable for its novel idea of a cartridge slot on the cartridge, which was used to update the rosters. They also made the only City Hunter console game ever. Finally, Gimmick. That other game that wasn't released in the US and barely released outside Japan at all. The only distributor that wanted this NES game in 1992 when the Super Nintendo was already out was Bergsala of Sweden. I had no idea Gimmick, or Mr. Gimmick, existed when I was a kid. But it sucks now to read the back of a magazine seeing it then available for 600 crowns when it has since become one of the holy grails of NES collecting. It's rare in Japan too. I found my copy in Sapporo for 19,000 yen when the standard price was over 30,000. Gimmick was the brainchild of Tomomi Sakai, a programmer from Aichi Prefecture who worked on the first Spy Hunter, Fester's Quest, Freedom Force, and was then allowed to design his own game. Gimmick is a game where its childish cuteness belie a very difficult game for pro players. Sakai's programming prowess provided players with very slopey slopes, enemies that follow you around and react to your actions, and being able to ride your own projectile star. Momentum is important. Aiming the star takes practice. Everything takes practice. But it's all doable for persistent, patient people. The music has become legendary. I think mostly because of the extra chip inside the cartridge, which gives it an undeniable fidelity. The best 8-bit sound quality ever. I got to meet Sakai in Nagoya in 2018 after reaching out to him on his blog, and while he wouldn't let me take his picture, he did sign my cartridge and drew this picture for me of Yume Taro, the main character. In late 1992, Sunsoft made Trip World for the Game Boy, which is not as difficult as Gimmick, but just as cute, and unfortunately almost as expensive. Sakai is listed as a hyper-advisor on Trip World, and the music programming was handled by Shinichi Seiya and Mega Man 2 composer Manami Matsumae. All of these games, by the way, were developed in this building, which is located in Konan City, just outside of Nagoya. It's still there, but doesn't seem to be in much use these days. What a difference a year makes. As 1992 turned to 1993, the decline started. On the surface not much changed, but still, comparing 1992 to 1993, Sunsoft went from a year where they released Gimmick, Trip World and Superman, to a year where they released Tasmania, Arrow the Acrobat and the Beauty and the Beast games for Genesis. I don't know why they did it, but they started relying more on other companies to develop their games, with diminishing returns. So diminishing that Sunsoft of America were facing bankruptcy by 1995, But it wasn't all their fault, as apparently Sun Corporation were investing in a golf course in Palm Springs, hit a metaphorical bunker, and the loss impacted their bottom line, according to a former Sunsoft of America employee. Sunsoft of America would keep up some kind of existence and did put out the occasional game, including more attempts to make a successful Blaster Master sequel, which unfortunately wouldn't quite happen until Inti Creates took the reins with Blaster Master Zero for the Switch. But it's not like they didn't make anything good in the Twilight times. Aero the Acrobat 2 was a lot better than the first. The spin-off Zero the Kamikaze Squirrel wasn't bad. Shonen Ninja Sasuke is a good beat-em-up. And mystifyingly, they would publish most of the console ports of Myst, even on Philips CDI. Nevertheless, after 1995, most of Sunsoft's releases were confined to Japan. They made some fighting games such as Galaxy Fight and Waku Waku 7. They continued their Albert Odyssey series of RPGs, made more Shanghai games, which is always nice, and in the late 90s they tried to give IREM a challenge to see who could make the most pachinko games. But on the other hand, they also did get creative occasionally, at least in the way that they copied from other games, like with Trag/Hard Edge, or the typing games on PS2. Looking at the later years of their release history is not too exciting, mostly pachinko and the occasional Shanghai version. In 2010 they came full circle with a Japanese-only, online-only release of Ikki Online for PS3. The last physical release of theirs came in 2019 with a physical version of 2017's Abduction, fittingly enough made by the makers of Myst. Technically, Sunsoft could come back at any time, as Sun Corporation is still doing fine in Japan, but as of now they don't seem to be doing anything.
Although, according to the Japanese website, they do have several mobile games available, a couple of PS4 VR games, and several of their classic games are available on services like the 3DS eShop and PSN.
Sunsoft has gone down in history as a company, as a brand, not for their failings, but for their time in the sun, when they burned bright with lots of great releases. I want to remember them as the ones that got licensed games right, as well as the ones that made great original games like Gimmick. I want to thank all their developers, musicians, and staff who shone a light on our gaming lives. Thank you, Sunsoft.